cave with two other guys. So I go up to this doorman building, take the elevator to the penthouse. This woman opens the door. I seem to remember that she was wearing like leopard print pants and had a martini and a cigarette, but maybe that's just the writer in me, yeah, director's cut. But in any event, she invited me in, and it was the nicest apartment I've ever seen.
Welcome to Learn or Be Learned. We either learn from others or others learn from us. The former is able to help us become a better, faster you. Follow me weekly as I dig up stories like a true anthropologist would on one of the 3 series called Guest Conversations, Book Applications, or my Small Talk Explorations. I'm your host, Shiva Danshaker, and let's talk. All right, welcome back everybody to another great episode on Learn or Be Learned. I'm here with Robert Kerbeck. He is a person who went from an acting career to more corporate spy. He has really interesting stories and a background. He's now also an author to a great book that we'll get into here shortly. Robert, thank you for being here. If you could, share a little bit about yourself with the audience, that'd be great.
Well, Shiva, I'm excited to be here. Now, if I had known you were in Dallas, Texas, I would have asked in advance if you were a Cowboys fan. and it sounds like you just moved to Dallas, so you might not be a Cowboys fan yet. So that's good for me because I'm from Philadelphia. My Eagles are undefeated. You're our big rivals. So right. I'm going to try to bring you over to my side during the course of this program. Okay.
Yes, we'll see.
Yeah. I'll do my best. If the show's interesting, maybe you'll pull for the Eagles next time.
Right.
So, I have this crazy story about how I became, essentially the world's, for lack of a better word, greatest corporate spy. That's what people said about me. It's not what I said about myself. And it was never anything I intended. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. Obviously, that's why I'm a big Eagles fan, and my family is well known in the area. The Kerbeck family is still to this day big in the automobile business. If you need a Lamborghini, tell them I sent you. Maybe they'll give you a discount. Probably not. But my great grandfather sold horse carriages before automobiles were invented. Then he switched and got an automobile dealership, one of the first in Philadelphia. Then my grandfather took over that dealership. My father took over that dealership, and I was supposed to take over that dealership. Ooh. And when I was in college, I kind of fell in love with acting. I really wanted to move to New York and try acting, but I didn't know anybody that had done that. It seemed too scary. So when I graduated, I went to work at the dealership with my father, and it just didn't feel right for me. The kind of the trickery of car sales felt a little dishonest to me, which of course is very ironic because then I become a corporate spy where the lying and deception is far worse than automobile sales. But again, that's part of this crazy story of my book, RUSE, that, we oftentimes in life end up in places we never, ever would have imagined. Our journeys go to, people and places that you could never have predicted. And so when I moved to New York, actors need survival jobs. I didn't have the patience to be a waiter. I wasn't a late night guy, so bartending was out. And this friend of mine had this job, and he kind of mentioned it, and then he shut up right away as if he said something he wasn't supposed to say. And I said, whoa, dude, I'm broke. I need a job. What is this job that you have that you're being so mysterious about?
You're like, don't hold back.
Don't hold back. Yeah. Help a brother out here. Right. And so he very reluctantly got me an interview. He did not tell me anything about the job. I went up for this interview, which was on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. For your listeners that maybe don't know New York that well, that's the ritziest area of Manhattan. That's like the old money. I was living in Hell's Kitchen in a cave with 2 other guys. So I go up to this doorman building, take the elevator to the penthouse. This woman opens the door. I seem to remember that she was wearing like leopard print pants and had a martini and a cigarette, but maybe that's just the writer in me.
Yeah. Director's cut.
Yeah, director's cut. But in any event, she invited me in, and it was the nicest apartment I've ever seen. It was just spectacular. It looked like it was right out of a magazine. And so right away I knew whatever this woman did, it was very lucrative, right? She was making a lot of money. And so we have this very strange interview. She never asked me anything about my skills. She doesn't ask to see my resume, which, back in the day, you actually had a physical copy of your resume. This is 90s. And she sends me on my way, and I'm pretty sure I didn't get the job. But then my buddy calls and says, you got the job, but don't get too excited because she hires everyone because no one is able to do this job. And the next day I went out to Brooklyn to begin training. And now this is when the crack epidemic is hitting Brooklyn hard. Brooklyn is not a neighborhood full of hipsters with beards and cool coffee shops. It's run down, dangerous. Get to this building, go walk up 4 flights of stairs, no elevator. I hear screaming and yelling and behind doors, and I don't quite know what I've got myself into. I knock on a door. This beautiful young woman opens it. She says, come on in, you'll work in my bedroom. And I still am going like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? We go into her bedroom. There's literally just a futon on the ground and a desk. And she says, have a seat at my desk, which I was happy about. I mean, she was attractive, but I didn't go there to, get on her futon. And she sits me down at the desk and she begins to say, look, what we do is we use our acting skills and we call major corporations and we trick people using personas, using voices, using accents. We trick people into giving us private corporate information, corporate secrets, corporate plans, information on products, information on people, information on salaries, basically anything that a rival would want to know about their biggest competitor. And we do that, and basically we're doing corporate espionage to get these secrets, which ended up being worth, at this point I was getting $8 an hour, and eventually towards the end of my spying career I was making millions of dollars a year doing this.
Wow. So, that leads me to my first question here, which is, you said that the lady told you, we basically trick people and, lie our way into getting, secrets. Had that ever, in your career, you ever do something that went against your value system or your beliefs? And how did you cope with that, if you did?
Well, yeah. And I mean, that was like I said, I think what the woman who had the firm realized is if she was telling people in the interview that you were going to have to lie and do all this stuff, a lot of people would have just said, no, thank you. But what she did is she kind of got you committed. Like, there I was at the training. I'm getting paid for the training. I'm a broke actor. I'm a young guy. I'm like, well, I do need a job. And so all of a sudden now she's kind of got pulling you in a little bit there.
Right.
And, at the time, I rationalized it, and there's no doubt, I never say that I'm proud of what I did, though it is a hell of a good story, and it's all true.
Yeah.
I've written this book. It's a true book about lying. But I think that the way I rationalized it was we were getting information from corporations, right? And anybody who's listening, you don't have to look far or really even look hard at all to see example after example of corporations bilking customers, taking advantage of customers, ripping off customers, big corporations. And so we were, for the most part, calling banks, and then later we branched into other industries. But at the time, we were mainly calling banks. And, again, we can look in the news a couple of years ago, Wells Fargo was opening 30, 40 accounts in one individual's names to create bonuses for their salespeople, even though these people, their credit was negatively impacted. Goldman Sachs, there are a lot of people that feel as though Goldman Sachs and a number of the big Wall Street banks were responsible for the crash of 2008, the greatest financial crash in our lifetimes, right? So that was part of it. I wasn't like getting old ladies' credit card numbers. I wasn't ripping off, I wasn't ripping off you and me. I was like, basically, this is capitalism. I'm going to ding Goldman Sachs, or I'm going to ding JP Morgan, boo-hoo for Wall Street. And that was kind of how I rationalized it.
Right. So it's almost like it's you're just one guy against the corporations rather than going after individuals.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean that was I'm like okay, first of all, every corporation, and this is something, again, your listeners, probably don't know, and this is why people have gotten excited about the book. We all know the Russians spy on the Chinese and the Chinese spy on us, but most people are shocked to find out that corporations are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to spy on each other, and they all do it.
Mm.
They all do it, and I know they all do it because they were all my clients. One day I was spying on this firm, and the next day they were my client. So
Yeah.
that's again how I justified it. Is I'm like, they're all doing it. It's just part of our capitalist system, for better or for
Mm.
worse.
Right. Right.
And
And
finally,
uh,
one last thing on that is that this was only a temporary job. That's what I thought in my mind. This was only a temporary job. I was an actor. Soon I was going to be famous. Soon I was going to have my own TV series.
mm,
And I did work a great deal as an actor. And again, your listeners can Google me and see. I did over 50 major TV shows, lead roles on Star Trek, Melrose Place, NYPD Blue,
mhm,
ER, Chicago Hope, Sisters, all of these shows. And I was working as an actor. And so my acting career was kind of going like this, and the spying was going. I was like, almost ready to be like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
done with that. I don't need it anymore. And then all of a sudden, I booked a whole bunch of TV pilots, and none of them got picked up. And really, what you needed, even today, what you really need
Mhm.
is you need to do a pilot that gets made into a series and that runs for a couple of years, and then everybody knows you and you really get established as an actor
Right.
and have a long successful career. Maybe you're not a movie star or whatever, but you're a working actor.
Mhm,
And I was working a lot, but the pilots that I booked never got picked up. I did 4 of them. None of them went to series. And
mhm,
that kind of all of a sudden took the wind out of my sails. And that's the part in the book where I go deeper and deeper into the world of corporate espionage. As my acting career wanes, I go deeper in the world. And then I have a lot of close calls, let's just
mhm.
say, with basically every authority on the planet.
Wow. And what's really interesting about that is how common it is to see people in hindsight, people's life go full circle, right? So
Mm.
how your corporate espionage and like spying career might actually help you back because I heard you're doing a TV series, is that correct? Based on your
Well,
book?
yeah, I mean, look, that's the most amazing thing that's come out of this whole book is that when I started and I went to college before I fell in love with acting, I was an English major.
Oh,
I was
okay.
writing. So that
Mhm.
was really the first thing I did was I was writing, and then
Mhm.
I was a young guy. I couldn't sit still. I had so much energy and I wanted to meet young women. And what better place to meet attractive young women than the theater, which turned out to be the truth. And I highly advise it for your male listeners out there, if they looking to meet some pretty young girls, sign up for a play. And Yeah, so I, you know, have basically circled back now with this book writing to where I really started. I'm
Mhm.
back at the beginning, and Ruse is in development for a TV series. I don't think I will be acting in it, though. They have asked me about maybe playing my father in the series because obviously I'm too young to play my young self. I mean, I'm too old to
Mm.
play my young self. Um, and that really kind of touched me, the idea of playing my dad. My dad's a big part of the book. He's kind of the heart and the anchor of the book.
Mhm.
Because when I leave the car business, he's very, he's kind of devastated by that. I was the oldest son, and
Right.
there had been this tradition. There was a placard on the front of our dealership that said since 1899.
Mm.
And to have a business last that long, was, through generations, was a really big deal. And here I was kind of turning my back on it. And then when I told my father, that I was a corporate spy, he was very concerned about that, obviously, and not happy at all. And
Mhm.
so, so he's a real big part of the book. And I don't think I'll play him in the movie because it's a great part. And I feel like with the TV series, there's some pretty well-known actors that might want to play that part,
Mhm.
and I think I'd rather have my TV show be successful,
Right.
because Leonardo DiCaprio is playing my father in it, or
Right.
whatever
Right.
whatever great older actor my age.
Right.
Um, than me do it and maybe out of ego or something.
Right. You do get the benefit of names associated when you do showbiz.
Yeah.
But, I think that, that's also a very touching idea. And I want to ask you this because I relate a lot. For me, I switched career paths from medicine to, for a while, not even sure what I'm doing. But, at the moment, I'm in data science and tech, and I do this. But, for my parents, I was devastating after all those years and, me getting closer and closer to getting that white coat, to see that, and I see the parallel in your story, right? You have generations of car business, and your dad probably just expected it, really.
Yeah.
It's been, in your blood for so long, and then you took the turn, right? You're also the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, same, right.
Oldest,
so
yeah.
so you set the path, right? So they were expecting it, you went against it. I want to ask, what was that mindset? Now it's maybe easier because it's like, look, dad, or look to whoever, what I've done now, right, in hindsight. But in the moment, what was your mindset going through all that?
Well, it was very, very difficult. I mean, from, I'm sure you're too, your parents, they love you and they want the best for you. And usually, they're thinking about career success, right? And career success and monetary success, because they want you to live a happy, comfortable life, right? And, here I am telling here I am an English major, like, good luck with that one, right?
Right.
And then I get into acting, and my father's like, oh my God, like and, my father, he, like growing up, when he grew up in the 50s, like the idea of being an artist, at least for him, it was just so beyond the beyond that when I told him these ideas, he was not happy at all. Not supportive at all either, which, that's part of the book too, because there was a lot of pain around that. There was pain for me that he didn't support me in this journey at all. Now he came around to it late in life, and this is in the book. Unfortunately, my father's he's gone, and he's been gone for a while, and his death is a big part of the book, and that's why I said he's like the anchor of the book, because he, at the end of his life, came around to supporting me. Which was really beautiful. And at the end of his life, we got very close, but there was a lot of tough times, right? Because when I left the business, the business kind of did go downhill for a long time, because, my father at that point was a little bit older. I was young, fresh blood. And, in the car business, I know car sales gets a lot of, has some negative, people think negative connotations, but I'm here to tell you, being a car dealer is hard work. You're running a small business. You're there 6 days a week. Now I think car dealerships are even open on Sundays. So, you're there all the time. If you want your business to be successful, you're there 60 plus hours a week, every week. And my father was a little bit older, and I came in, I was young, I had energy, and I was willing to work those hours, and I was good at it. So for me to be so good at it and willing to work so hard and then leave it, I know that was heartbreaking for him.
Right. And so what did you do as your support system, or how did you find that within yourself, or, how did you go about it?
It was like, this expression, let the torpedoes be damned. I just said, look, I have to live my life. This is my life. And I can't, I was afraid that if I stayed at the dealership, that my father would be happy, and I would probably make a ton of money, which is ironic, because I ended up making a ton of money at corporate spying, but I didn't know that. At the time. But I think I would have made a ton of money, but I also think that, I don't know, maybe I would have been really susceptible to depression or drug use, or, any of these things that happen when we make decisions in life that aren't the decisions we really want to make and we're not happy with. Right. And so now you're living a life for someone else. You're in a relationship with someone you don't want to be in. You're in a job you don't want to be in. whatever the situation that you find yourself stuck in, if you don't get out of it, there's a cost. There's a cost for that. And I just was not going to I was not going to live the life that my father wanted me to live for him. I wasn't going to do that. So I got out, and it was a very, very difficult time in my relationship with my father when I left, and it took a long time, a lot of years. And when I started doing TV shows, so now I'm doing TV shows with George Clooney, and I'm doing plays with James Gandolfini, and and I'm getting hit on by Kevin Spacey. I'm drinking beers with Paul Newman, right? So I had all these incredible experiences, and when those started happening, and I started popping up on TV, then my father started to come around to go, oh wow, well, you know what? Maybe he was right to take this journey.
Right.
There's this famous Bruce Springsteen story. Bruce Springsteen's father, kind of same thing, was basically like, musician, like rock star, like, what are you, crazy? Come and work in the factory, don't be an idiot, right? And they had a lot of difficult times for many years because, Bruce Springsteen, it was a long time. It wasn't until his I think third album, Born to Run, that became, one of the greatest albums of all time that really put him on the map. But, he had a number of years where he was, living in a surf shack and broke. And at one point he was getting married, and now he's a famous rock star, and he's getting married, and the ceremony and all the people, and there are all these helicopters flying overhead, paparazzi trying to get shots and filming it. And the father looks up at all the helicopters and all the crazy scene and the buzz and he goes, looks like I was wrong about you not taking that rock and roll career, And I love that story that that's what it took for the father to admit, right? It's kind of like my dad too. It's like, well, you're on TV, with famous people. So yeah, maybe I was wrong.
Right. Oh man. Yeah. Resistance is hard, especially when you haven't come through the other side. So you don't have that social proof to, say what I chose this because of this. And when you have that social proof, people will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right. Like, very clear. The path is clear. But when you're in it and you're in the trenches and doesn't seem very clear, then, I love this quote. It says, life is hard for one of two reasons. You either are trying to get out of your comfort zone or you're staying in it. And I think that's so true because, whether you're pushing yourself now, it's really uncomfortable. Or if you stay in your comfort zone now, like you with the car dealership, right? Maybe in 30 years, you might have been like, I could have done something, I could have done acting. I could have tried something else. And that kind of regret honestly scares me more than failing and trying. So
Shiva, that's genius what you just said, because that's the truth. Look, I worked as an actor. I have a pension from the Screen Actors Guild, which is a pretty cool thing to be able to say. I feel like it's like I made the major leagues. I don't know if you know much about baseball, but I think they have 25 guys on team. So like, I was the 25th guy in the major leagues, or the 24th guy. Pretty cool. Yeah. But what did I become the famous actor that I wanted to be? No, right? And was that disappointing? Yes, but I went for it. So disappointment, okay, we're all going to have disappointments, but what we don't want to have are those lifelong regrets,
right?
That you didn't try to do this, that you didn't, do whatever thing, you at least give it a shot, right? And I think that's the difference. Disappointments are inevitable in life, but what you don't want are those big regrets.
Right. Did you have any regrets along your path, or did you make an effort to avoid them?
I made an effort to avoid them. Obviously, I was an English major in college because that really appealed to me, and now that's really worked out because now I've written two books that I'm very proud of.
Right.
I wrote this book, RUSE, about corporate spying. And then my previous book was Malibu Burning, which was about the wildfire in Malibu that burned half the town down a few years ago, that my family, we fought the fire and we saved our house. 17 of 19 houses on our street burned to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
LA Times asked me to write an essay about that. And then a publisher read that essay and asked me to write this book. And, it was a real labor of love because, people died, animals died, people lost their homes. When,
Right.
When a wildfire burns your home down, I mean, everything is gone. Everything is incinerated. Nothing survives. The
Right.
house, the refrigerator, the family Bible, your grandfather's World War I uniform. If you're a kid, every drawing, everything gone. Right. So it's just devastating for people. And so I was happy that I could write a book that, showed kind of the resilience of the community out here. Everybody thinks everyone in Malibu is rich or famous. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. There are some famous people, of course, but and it was really an amazing thing how many people fought the fire. Like we fought the fire and saved our own home. There were many people that fought the fire and saved entire neighborhoods.
Wow.
80-year-old people, with boots, stamping out fires, saving homes. It was really crazy and beautiful what people did. So again, I was an English major. It enabled me to now, pivot into writing. And we're living in a world right now where a lot of people are thinking about pivoting, right? Pivoting careers because, coming out of COVID, we all, learned that life is short, and you better do what it is you want to do. And so, you talked about pivoting from maybe being a doctor, pivoting into something different. So I encourage people, if what you're doing isn't working for you, whether it's in your love life or your professional life, it's never too late to pivot to something else. Here I am, I'm in my, mid 50s and I just published my first books a couple of years ago, and RUSE this year. Malibu Burning was 2019. So, to become an author, at 50, if I could do it, somebody else can do it, and by the way, you could become a doctor at 50. You can become a podcaster at 50, right? There are all kinds of things you can do. And I think that's, if anybody takes anything out of this and my book, I had a lot of careers. I had a lot of different careers. And I'm glad that I went on that journey, because that's what life is. It's a journey. So go on the journey you want to go on.
Right. And, you said that you had an English major, and when I was doing my pre-med is just requirements. You can do any major you want. So I took on, most people took science, right? Biology, neuroscience. That's where I was at first. And then I fell in love with anthropology and theology. And that's actually what I majored in along with pre-medicine. And, I think I had a similar circumstance because once I entered the workforce, I realized those majors don't make a difference to employers at all. Right. So, and then, the question I've always kind of hated the most in the last few years is, was it a waste? Was it a waste of time? I hate that question because my answer is always the same. It's, I don't know yet, because it's only something you can answer in hindsight when I look back and say, oh, I'm so glad I did it because it helped keep me here, but I don't know that yet. Right. So where I wanted to segue that is like how it wraps up with what you're saying is, I love this idea of life being like a dance rather than a journey of start to finish. Because when it's a dance, you can comfortably pivot and not make it seem like you're moving backwards, if that makes sense, right? The mindset, most people's mindset is moving forward or backwards. Right. But with a dance, you can move, you can step to the side, you can go forward, it's backwards, it's all the same. There is no end goal. You're just living life. And I think it really matches with what you're saying is, you've had many career changes. You tried things, you became an actor, maybe not as far as you wanted to go, but that was your pivot. That was the part of the dance. So,
Yeah. And like the even like being an English major today, I read an article recently in the Los Angeles Times. It said, where did all the English majors go? And it was talking about in today's world, fewer and fewer people are choosing humanities as their major as undergraduates. I get it, right? Schools are very expensive. you're going to take out a whole bunch of student loans, which I did because I paid for college myself because my father didn't want to pay for me to be an English major because he was mad. He
Right.
wanted me to study business.
Right.
So I had to pay for college myself. And so I get it, right? But I'm here to tell you that in the world we live in, what do we do more than almost anything today? We write.
Right.
Every tweet, every Instagram post, every Facebook post, you know what I mean? You're
Texts.
doing right. Texts, emails, you're writing all day long. And if you're in the corporate world, you're writing stories. Every one of your notes about a deal, about a meeting, about an appointment, about something that somebody needs to do or you need to, there's communication that's going on. And it's almost always written communication because people don't get on the phone as much anymore, right?
Right.
Especially young people, right? The phone is we're not getting on the phone.
Right.
And so so I'm just talking in terms of my English major. That major is so valuable. I think people don't realize that. In this article in the Los Angeles Times, it didn't get to that, which I really want to write that author, because it was an interesting article, but I think he missed on talking about how in our world today, we write more than we've ever written before. Everybody, because remember, not that long ago, many people couldn't read. Many people couldn't write. Well, we're fortunate we live in a society now where most people go to school and learn to read and write. Very high percentage. So everybody, is doing this. And so the idea of being an English major, far from being this esoteric thing that isn't going to pay off. I mean, I think the skills that I developed as a writer helped me in my corporate America job, my corporate spying job. Because I had to, then take the information that I was getting and I had to put it into documents. I had to tell stories with so that they communicated well to my clients. And I know they appreciated that, which is why they paid me a, ton of money because I was able to create these documents that were really well written and fun to read too, So anyway,
a great time.
Chipper, what a pleasure! Great call. And fly, Eagles, fly.
Of course. Anyways, thank you all for listening to this episode, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks. No, I actually think that's a great point. I actually didn't think of that because humanities and the degrees in humanities often develop better soft skills, right? That's mainly where the focus is, whether it's writing, speaking, presenting, research. And I think I've actually noticed that in the workforce, right? A lot of people have hard skills, technical skills, but not a lot of people are good at communicating, public speaking, writing, like we've been talking about, right? So these softer skills, I think, are more neglected. And, that could just be due to the fact that college is so overpriced now that people are scared to pay for soft skills like that.
Yeah.
But, I'm grateful for how, where I've come so far. And I that is a very interesting point that you made that I see.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like I said, college is overpriced, and it's really wrong that people, young people should have to go into 50,000, 60,000, 75,000, whatever it is, dollars in debt just to get a college degree. That's just wrong, So I understand the pressures, to, study science, to study engineering, to study computers. But I'm here to tell you, I made millions. And it all started with an English degree.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying I recommend a career in corporate spying, but if your listeners want to contact me, they can go to my website, robertkerbeck.com. You can easily email me from my website. And I'm here to tell you, corporate spying is alive and well. I don't do it anymore for obvious reasons. I've outed myself with this book. But there's plenty of work for corporate spies out there. So if anyone's listening right now and they're like, hey, I think I would like to pivot into corporate spying, email me from my site and I'll tell you how to do it.
Yep. And I'll have all that in the podcast description, guys. Just click the link and shoot your shot.
Yeah, go for it.
And this is actually really interesting. I don't think the audience members know this. Robert is a man with many talents in accents. Is that correct?
Ah, yes. So, one of the things that we learned, and this is, it took me a while to realize this, but the crazier the ploy we would use to get information, right? The crazier it was, the more believable it became. It was very counterintuitive, right? And we learned this, and you sometimes see this, they'll do this in a movie where somebody will create some crazy disturbance in the movie. And you think like, wow, they're drawing all this attention to themselves.
Right.
But in a weird sort of way, by doing it, it puts people at ease, and then they get away with whatever it is they're trying to get away with, right? So, and all the different people that trained me to do this job, we all had our go-to accent. One woman, she used the Irish accent. Somebody else was English. My go-to was German. So I'd be like, "This is Gerhard calling from the office in Frankfurt. We have the European Union regulators here, and we need some information from the States." And you think about it, these corporations are huge, right? They have offices, in Tokyo, London,
right.
Frankfurt, Berlin, right? All over the world, Paris, And so when somebody gets that crazy call, what do they say? They go, "Hey, Gerhard, hey, what's going on, man?
Yeah,
What's the weather like there in Germany? And you get this friendship because their day is they're talking to the same old people. It's boring. All of a sudden, they got somebody that they believe is in the Frankfurt office and is jammed up and needs some help. They want to be a good corporate teammate. They're enjoying this guy and his crazy accent. What do they do? They help you, and they give you information. And every once in a while, they'd start going, "Well, hey, Gerhard, what do you need all this information? From the States, if you're in Germany, and you go, "Oh, the European Union needs this information. They are very strict here in the Germany, and then they're like, "Wow, man, okay, well, what do you need, buddy?" And now they're telling you all this information, right?
Right.
So that was awesome. That was my go-to.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming there's probably some sort of manipulation tactics too to disalarm people, make them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Did you have to read books? How did you learn those kind of tactics?
I think that part of that was just in my DNA from growing up in the car business. My dad, when I was learning to sell cars, he said, that what you have to do is you have to identify right away the customer's objections to buying the car right now, right? Because ideally, you want somebody to come in and buy a car right then and there, buy the car, and so you had to identify what was their objection. Was the objection they didn't like the car, they didn't like the color of the car, they didn't like this about the car, and then maybe you could get them onto a different car, or find the exact car that we had. Maybe we didn't have the right color, but there was another dealership that we could trade, and then we'd have that car, So you would identify what the objection was. It was the same thing with getting people to give information, right? Now, the first thing I would do is I would always set up every conversation, and I, with a softball question, So I'd be like, "Hey, Shiva, you're in the Dallas office, right?" And you'd go,
I'd be like, "Right.
Yeah, I'm in the Dallas. Oh, okay. Hey, great. Hey, Cowboys, boy, they great game, right? Yeah, blah, blah, right. So I'm establishing two things. One, I asked you a question and you answered it. Where are you based? Dallas. You answered it, right? So if you answered one question, much more likely that you're going to answer a second question, a third question, as opposed to, "Hey, Shiva, you're in the Dallas office," and somebody could go, "Why are you asking me that question?" Right now. If I get that, I know I've got someone initially very suspicious, because it's such a simple thing. You're in the Dallas office. It's not a big, I'm not asking you spy questions yet.
Right.
I'm setting you up with the most innocuous question that there is. And 99% of the time, the person goes, "Yeah, I'm in the Dallas office." Oh, hey. And now I start working on becoming a telephone buddy with you. We're becoming pals, right? And then I start asking you some other questions, but I keep the questions very, very generic, no big deal. And so I get you kind of hooked with some easy questions. And once I've established you'll answer questions, and you've answered 2, why won't you answer 3? If you've answered 3, why won't you answer 4? And all of a sudden, each question starts getting more and more intense and
Mm-hmm.
more the intelligence I need. And usually what happens is somewhere about halfway through that people have now given me a lot of information, and now they get nervous. And now they go,
Mm.
hey, I don't know if I should be giving you all this information. And then, well, look, we're almost done now. Another minute and a half and we're done. Let's just
Right.
finish this up. I only need this information once every 2 years with the regulators and the blah 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 and the whatever story I've concocted. And they're like, oh, and because they have kind of already committed to it, they finish.
Mm.
They finish. And sometimes at the end of it, they're like, oh, and then other times they're not. Some people are just giving me information nonstop. And in many cases, I would be able to come back to them time after time, to the same
Wow.
person with the same story for years. And they would basically sort of become an internal mole. And they would be providing me information, for a long, long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So are most of these are there stories in your books from what you've done, and
Oh,
what can
yeah.
people
Yeah.
expect in your book?
Yeah, so it's, you see me doing all of these ploys, the inside ploy, the compliance ploy, the dropping the grapefruit ploy. We created all of these, the Gerhardt ploy, right? We had
Right.
all of these ploys that we used to get information,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I personally think I wrote this book Ruse during COVID, and coming out of COVID, I wanted my book to be fun. I wanted to be something fun to read. It's a page turner. It reads like a spy novel because it is a spy novel, but it's all true.
Mm.
But I also think that for anybody that's interested in utilizing these techniques in terms of sales, invaluable. And also, if you want to see what not to do and how not to get phished and how not to get scammed, you will learn all of that in this book.
That's perfect. I think people do definitely need to hear that, especially with technology now. It's becoming more and more advanced. It's actually becoming kind of scary how easily someone can hack into you. Someone could send you a bank email that looks just like your bank, and you
Yeah,
click on the link, and that's it, game over,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah, yeah,
and it's that, well, like you said before, it's really interesting with psychological and manipulation tactics. I think what you were talking about is foot in the door, right? You slowly edge someone into keep doing stuff. And I think I read something like, if you want to ask someone to do something, you're more likely to get them to do it if you add a reason to the end of the request, right? So if you
right,
say, can I cut in line because I'm running late for this? And apparently it can even be a bad reason, but just because you gave a reason, people are way more likely to let you cut,
right,
because why else would you ask, right? So
right.
I think that's so interesting. I'm sure you learned a lot of sales, manipulation, people, those kind of skills.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was most fascinating is when we started doing the job. Again, that woman hired me, and initially she only hired women to do the job because she thought women made better spies.
Hmm.
And then she hired my buddy. My buddy in the book is called Pax, and he was the first guy she ever hired. And then he got me hired, and then we were the only men that she hired or that worked out for a long, long time. The women were better; they were better at the job than we were, especially in the beginning. And my buddy and I learned, like, wow, these women are killing us in this job. And they would, back in the day, we're talking 90s, most of the assistants and receptionists were female. And so they would be a receptionist calling another receptionist, or be a secretary calling another secretary, or be an assistant calling another
Right.
assistant. And they would play the, my boss is horrible, my boss is yelling at me. Sometimes
Right.
they would cry. I mean,
That's
they,
genius.
yeah, one of the female spies could cry like that, and so now she gets this assistant on the, and I, when she was training me, I was like, this isn't going to work. You're crying on the phone, like, come on. And the person on the phone would go, okay, well, calm down. No,
Oh
it's
my
not that
gosh.
bad. My boss yells at me all the time too. I will help you. What do you need?
Right.
And they would get the information just
Wow.
because she cried on the phone.
Yeah.
And so when I would call the assistant, I wasn't going to be able to cry.
Right,
And
right.
so all of a sudden, and the assistants, remember, assistants, receptionists, they're trained to be gatekeepers. They're
Mm,
trained not to give this information out. And so me and my buddy Pax, we were getting shot down all the time. And we
right.
began to realize we needed to develop different ploys. And what we began to learn was we would go right to the major executives, right to the big shot senior executives, and we would be a big shot senior executive in a different office.
Oh,
Someone
yeah.
whose name they would recognize, but these firms are so big now that
Right,
most people don't have direct, but they would go, oh yeah,
right,
you're out in the LA office in the compliance department. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
Oh, hey, great to
It's
talk to you,
also
but
kind of like a slap in the face if you really are someone who's bigger up in a different office and they go, you're not real and they really are, it's kind of a slap in the face, so they might
yeah.
avoid it.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was part of our ploy. We
Yeah.
were using the corporate hierarchy and our seniority as a cudgel to
Mm,
basically force the executive who was a VP, and I was saying I was a senior VP.
mm,
They didn't want to rock that boat. And
right.
so what we found is that when we went bro to bro, executive to executive, we got far more information.
Mm.
I found that the executives were far easier marks than the receptionists and the assistants.
Right, I think they'd be I think, if you were someone that was an executive, right, I think your thought process would be that you'd be a low suspect. It's like, who would actually go after someone higher up in the, hierarchy, right? So they
Right.
probably had their guard down. That's really
Yeah.
smart too. That's really that makes an interesting stories for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, again, I wrote the book, so it's fun. And, it's fun, like, because, some of these executives that I'm calling, that I'm rusing, hence the title of the book, they're making, $10 million a year, $20
Mm,
million a year, and they're pretty arrogant. And there were a number of calls that I had with executives that they were, jerks, and they were, really rude. And so the reader, I think, a lot of times enjoys, even though they know I'm doing something that's wrong.
right.
They're kind of like, yeah, you got that Wall Street guy, way to
Right.
go. And again, it's kind of that David versus Goliath thing,
Yeah,
because
right.
you knew, at least in the early days of me doing this job, I was trying to be an actor. I wasn't making a lot of money. And
Right.
so when you see me getting this guy's making $10 million a year as being a jerk, and I
Yeah.
get him to give up state secrets, it's kind of fun.
You're like Robin Hood, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Robert, I really enjoyed having you here on this show and I loved our conversation. I want to ask you one more question to close out the show. It's called Learn or Be Learned. So I want to
Mhm.
ask you, what is one thing that you either learned from others or you want others to learn from you along your journey so far?
Well, learn or be learned, ruse or be rused.
Right.
you know,
Right.
so it's like you're either doing a con or being conned
Mhm.
oftentimes in life. And again, I'm not advising anybody to follow my career as a corporate spy, but I do think one of the things that people will get from the book is how not to be taken advantage of, how not to be taken advantage of in business, and how not to be
Mm,
taken advantage of even more in personal relationships. Because in the book, you go on this journey with me, and at a certain point, I actually take a job in corporate America because I'm going broke after the crash of 2008, when all corporate spying just stopped. I had a mortgage and a family, and I needed a job, so I take this job in corporate America. And what was amazing is um, how the lying done in corporate America, face to face, was far worse than the lying I'd been doing over the phone. Right.
wow. Yeah.
So here I am. I have this job. I think people were all on the same team. We're all working together, and everybody was lying to me, lying behind my back. And not just me.
Hmm.
Everybody. It was so cutthroat. It
Hmm.
was such a like a And again, this is Wall Street, and so I guess this is just the way these firms are. But you watch some of the TV shows and you see that, right? Some of the great Wall Street shows like Billions, and there's a new
Hmm.
one called Industry on HBO, where you see just these people that work together, that one second they're having fun, they're drinking, then
Hmm.
some of them are even sleeping together, and yet they're stabbing each other in the back
Wow.
any chance they get. And so if people do pick up ruse, which of course I hope they do, and if you are seeing me tricking all these people, and you're getting a little bummed out, like, man, this guy Robert is tricking all these people. Don't worry, read a few more pages, because pretty soon I become the victim. I'm the one
Oh.
getting rused in corporate America. I'm the one being taken advantage of and ripped off.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so it's kind of a fun twist. And again, I
Uh-huh.
think, learn to be learned, ruse or be rused, right?
Right. I
Because
love
here I
that.
am, supposedly such a great ruser, and I got
Right.
rused.
Right, right. That's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, if you like read Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power and books like that, I think people often will say things like, that book's very dark, it's very manipulative, things like that. But I think the power in that kind of knowledge is to know what to avoid,
Mm.
what to expect from potentially others, right? And not everyone's like you. Some people are worse, some people are better. So it's good to arm yourself with that kind of knowledge, right? Ruse or be rused. So it's good to know the tactics and manipulation, not necessarily condoning using it, but it's like
Be
self-defense, right?
exactly, be
Mhm.
aware. Be
Yeah.
aware, like, oh, wait a second now. I got this email and this text, and it's really pressuring me. Time pressure. Do this now. Click on this now. Well,
Mhm.
man, in that ruse book, that's what he was doing to get people to give up those secrets.
Right.
Same kind of thing, right? You see the, how similar, whatever the form is, whether it's rusing on a phone call, phishing, via email and text. And by the way, the best uh, social engineers, what I call rusers, that are now doing all these major ransomware attacks, they use a combination of both old school and new school. So, for example, they send out the phishing email and then they follow it up with a phone call. Hey,
Mm.
so you get the email, from or the text from Bank of America that your account has been hacked, and then they followed up. Hey, this is Bank of America. Did you get our email? You have a very serious situation. We need to rectify this. I just have a couple of questions. I'm going to take care of this for you right now.
Mm.
Wow. How do you, like that? That's pretty
It's
hard
good.
to,
Yeah.
right? That's good. That's a
Hmm.
good one. And
Yeah.
so they're using both, the tech and the old school personal touch. It's like a double whammy. And unfortunately, a lot of people fall for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think people would really benefit from, learning how to, self-defense and manipulation, and take a look at your book. It'll be in the podcast description, like we mentioned earlier. But anyways, Robert, thank you so much for being here.